in council, I imagine that we're still doing Zoom and stuff too, right? Yeah, so there are some people at home, but welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with an invocation, which we observe by having a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bajan.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Thanks. Next up, we have a request for approval of the council minutes from the budget workshop and the regular meeting of May 25th.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the city council minutes of the budget workshop and regular day meeting of May 25th, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajan.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we have under special business, first up, Mike, welcome back. You were with us at the work session. The Q2 2021 quarterly report.
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening. Yes, I have the second quarter financial report to go through this evening. And the cover, you should have received a electronic copy of this in your agenda packet. It's the Harrison Hollow Trailhead. And getting into some numbers just to get through this hopefully quickly. This is a snapshot of revenues through March. And just hitting the high points. Property tax has been paid as it normally is. We just have a lower levy amount this year with the governor's grant program. Sales tax, we had a very conservative budget and we already expect to be over that significantly. A year ago, we thought that the pandemic could really reduce the economy and sales tax. And actually the reverse happened. We're still surprised at how strong sales tax has been. So we're at 30% of budget. We do expect that to be well over budget. Development fees is another area where we had a conservative budget set. Given the pandemic, development fees and construction activity has held up quite well and is starting to look even better. So we also expect to be like 2 million or more over budget in development fees by the time we finish the year in September. Just a point on that and expense savings I'll get to in the next slide is we already are considering those funds when we come to you with the budget and talk about unallocated and one-time funds. We are factoring that in, and we likely will be coming back later this year with budget changes to move some of these budget figures. Moving down, liquor tax continues to do well. Franchise fees are slightly soft, but probably are doing better now with the economy reopening. Department revenue, we still are seeing weakness there, just given two areas, mainly park user fees, and hopefully that is starting to change as again, we open up, and then parking. And we will be monitoring parking to see how much that starts to come back with more people downtown and such. Fines and forfeitures is also an area that is lower, just given less parking, lower parking and towing fines. I think traffic fines are also down. But looking at those, we see potential to cover those revenues. We've gotten through quite well. A year ago, we would have said this would be good if we could get to where we are now. The other point just to notice is other revenue. We have some federal pandemic grant revenue in there. Moving on to the expenses. Again, this is through March. Key numbers in there. If you look at personnel subtotal, we're at 47% of budget through March. Fair number of vacancies that is driving that number. the benchmark would be 50% of the year. So we're under budget there. Repairs and maintenance are higher, and that's due to the timing of software maintenance. A lot of our Microsoft and other licenses are front loaded in the year. So that's why that number is higher. Bus operations is at 25%. Normally that's higher, but that's just due to the timing of BRT contributions to their budget. And in general, M&O, maintenance and operation costs are at 38% of budget. So a little bit lower, again, mainly due to BRT. And overall, we're at 40% of the budget expenses through 6 months. So again, we are ahead of budget, and we'll be monitoring that to see if we'll be coming under budget and may consider some budget changes. Moving on to just some economic brief highlights. And again, the back part of the book has the economic brief. Again, development activity was at a steady level and appears to be improving. Also, housing inventory continues to be exceptionally low. Idaho home prices increased 25% in the last 12 months, ending March. That is easily first in the country, as we've had in last couple of years. The national average was 11.3%. The next two closest states were Montana at about 19% and Arizona at about 18%. I mentioned sales tax already, and even if we look at just the revenue sharing portion, which goes to cities and counties, it is up 16% over the same quarter from a year ago. It's surprising a number can be that high. So it's a good sign for the Idaho economy. And if we look at gross sales tax, it's up 18% year over year. We are currently limited for the city's collections to 1% growth through June. The good news is the way sales tax was so strong last year, this new legislation sets a base year and our base got set. And so now we just calculate basically 1% on that, and we still get a good number here that will be much higher than our budget. Then moving on to airport traffic, a couple bullet points here. If we look at monthly traffic, March was up to 71% of March 2019 as a comparison year. Last year, the pandemic was setting in, and April last year was a low point. If we look at April this year, it's up to 79% again of the April 2 years prior. So things are looking up there. Also, if we look at economic growth for 2021, it is projected now to be significantly stronger than thought even a few months ago. The number 3 months ago was for 3.1% GDP growth for 2021. Now it is at 6.2. It is double what it was. And that is coming after a 3.5% negative growth last year with the pandemic. Also, unemployment is very interesting right now. By March, we were down to 3.6%. So if 4% is full employment, we're already getting ahead of that, which indicates a tighter labor market. There's a lot of things going on there. But for April, the figure was down to 3.1%. So if things continue, we should be down below 3% again, which is getting to be quite low. And yet we know jobs are available. We see jobs, people are hiring all over the place. The other thing that's happening is entry-level wages are going up. If you drive by McDonald's, you may see a sign that says they're starting people at $13 an hour. So that helps some people who work those jobs. The unemployment rate has decreased, but the other thing to notice is so did our labor force participation. Some people have left the job market, and one thing that will be interesting to see now is how many can get coaxed back into the job market and how long it will take. Two key demographics that are driving that is some people with the pandemic decided to retire early if they're retirement age. Working parents, particularly women, a lot of people left jobs to stay home with kids, with schools closed and childcare centers and such. So in time, as some of those come back, we actually need workers. Some possible reasons for, I guess, job vacancies and while people are hiring, and I think it's a multifactorial thing. There are still some lingering virus safety concerns for some people. They would rather not work in a public setting. There's some preference for remote work if you can get it. I think some of that is starting to change with masks coming off and that and more vaccinations, but that could linger. And there continue to probably be some daycare and schooling challenges. Schools should be open in the fall. Daycare should be opening up, but from my own personal experience, that is not something you do right away. Also, the kids hopefully can get vaccinated this fall, the younger kids. Some employees are probably just seeking higher pay, looking to change jobs. Some people have probably left leisure and hospitality. And then the other thing everybody's heard about is the enhanced unemployment benefits. Does that give people an incentive to stay home? Certainly there's some of that. We will find out soon how this starts to shake out over the summer. There is a view out there that small businesses in particular may still be struggling to hire. We've got in-migration. We still have jobs. Do we have enough people for them? Another thing I've read is perhaps people who are moving here, if they're retired or if they work remotely out of state, they're not available to work here. They contribute to our economy. They live here. It's almost a little like a resort town effect. So different things going on there, but my sense is we are likely to be below 3% unemployment, and we will be looking at that labor force participation to see if we get more people back.
I've got a question about that. So in April, it was 3.1% unemployment. What was it pre-pandemic?
I want to say we were about 2.3. We were in that mid to lower 2% range, Mayor.
Okay. And there's also a lot of college students that haven't come back that often take the downtown restaurant jobs, the service sector jobs. They've been schooling remotely.
Yes, Mayor. There could be some summer employment there where
Or year round, like Boise State students that,
certainly.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If someone wants a job and there are plenty of jobs to be
We're looking
found,
forward to them being back on
Yeah.
campus in the fall. I think that'll impact some of, it'll be helpful to businesses around the city that have relied on younger employees.
Yes. This is just a graph, it's in the economic brief, shows the unemployment and the line, you'll see a line off to the left under January through March, which shows our jobs are just a little bit below where they were a year ago before the pandemic hit. So again, we'll be monitoring that to see how much that comes up and if we start seeing some job growth and we still see that immigration is occurring. So that will be something also interesting to watch as things go forward.
Madam Mayor, I'm curious about if we have these statistics for other cities in the Treasure Valley. Like, for example, Amazon brought a huge warehouse online during the pandemic, likely hiring thousands. So I'm kind of curious if some of our employment numbers reflect folks just working other places and kind of filling those vacuums.
Madam Mayor, Council Member, yes, that there could be something like that. That Amazon distribution center is now, I think, also raised their starting pay from like $15 to around $17 an hour. And yeah, a lot of need for workers.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Something I've observed on social media a lot too is people saying goodbye to Boise and Idaho because of the social climate. And that for somebody reading the news, they would see this as a place that is inhospitable. And that is also part of it. And I think there is questions about whether or not that enhancement of unemployment really did have the effect that people presuppose that it does. Are we going to do any sort of surveying to determine what's going on rather than guess?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, good question. I would think that as things evolve here at some point, there will be some economists and others who try to explain, study what has happened and what's the changes in labor force, what's the, people who may have migrated in or migrated out or done different things or changed industries because it's very interesting. And if you start looking at, will we have enough workers? This could take a while for it to resolve where we could be labor short.
Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. The fact that our immigration rates have not been what they once were because of policy at the national level, I'm wondering if that's also affecting our ability to hire folks who would normally do some of those service industry type jobs.
Yes, I think historically we've had more immigration and that spigot has kind of dried up. And I think there is also a view out there, like in the agricultural industry, that they need the visas or something to get people in to run dairies or other agricultural jobs. So yes, there is pressure there as well. Yep. Another thing too, just to throw out, Councilmember Sanchez, is I've also read recently that some people maybe find they just need to leave Boise to get housing because the cost of housing is so hard to come by and it's become so expensive and keeps going up. So here is the March unemployment rates. Boise 3.6%. Again, for April, it was 3.1%, and we're doing significantly better than the country overall. And then this is comparing our metropolitan statistical area, which is the greater Boise area, to other Western cities. And with the exception of Salt Lake, we're doing quite well. And I think we're 40th out of 389 areas in the country. And then here is the airport passenger traffic. Again, the top green line is 2 years ago, so it's starting to work its way back. And that is happening faster than a year ago. We thought it was going to take a long time, and now it's coming back quickly. So in summary, our revenues and expenditures are within expectations. We have some conservative revenues budgeted versus revenues we're seeing that have held up or improved. And again, we'll probably have some budget changes later to deal with some of these things, given things are turning out better than we first expected. We also see some expense savings due to staff vacancies, reduced activities. This is canceled events, closed buildings, reduced travel, and things like that. And then overall, our economic conditions appear to be stable and improving. So that's the end of my slides. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Anyone have questions?
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, I'll just ask Cody. I'm still going to talk to the clerk for a moment. Cody to come up with the revised findings. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As you'll recall, on May 18th of this year, you approved an appeal overturning a decision of the Historic Preservation Commission to disallow solar panels on a street facing facade in the north end. Included in your packet was a set of findings and conditions of approval reflecting that decision, and we're asking for your approval or adoption of those this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Cody. I reviewed the findings and found that they were in line with a decision that we made on this matter. And unless there's further discussion, I would move that we accept the findings on, sorry, I'm looking for the number. DRH 21-72 for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks, Cody. Next up, we'll move to the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move into ordinances. We have two on the first reading calendar.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the first reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 28-21, an ordinance CAR 21-00003 for property located at 5454 through 5490 West Grover Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from R-1C, single-family residential urban, to R-2D, medium-density residential with design review overlay, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date. ORD 30-21, an ordinance amending Boise City Code geothermal system regulations 10-3-2 to update definitions, amending Boise City Code geothermal system regulations to remove reference to natural gas prices, and amended Title 10, Chapter 3 for general corrections, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 31-21, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 10, Chapter 1, irrigation system regulations, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date.
Thank you. There are no ordinances on second or third reading, but we have one on first, second, third.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ORD 2921 be suspended, that the portions of Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and that the record show it has been read for the 3rd time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 29-21, an ordinance amending the development code regarding specific procedures, section 11-03-032B1. I, correcting clerical errors with respect to notification requirements for subdivisions greater than 5 acres, conditional use permits greater than 5 acres, and gateway streets, providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD 2921 be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move into new business. First, we have one subdivision. And it is SUB 20-16. Is the applicant here in the chambers? All right, is the applicant online? Okay, great. What we'll do is we'll hear, nobody has signed up for this here. This item is that, I'm just going to look to everybody here first. Anybody here sign up for, did you intend to testify on this? Okay. If there's anyone online, I don't imagine that there is, but if there is, raise your hand and we'll be able to call on you. We'll start first with city staff. Kevin, welcome. And then is it either Abby Stover or Kathy Venrick, the applicant? You can let us know if you're in agreement with terms and conditions or answer questions from the council and we'll move from there. So go ahead, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, very good to see you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So as you said, this is a preliminary and final plat application for a residential subdivision comprised of 9 buildable lots on 1.4 acres in R1B and R1C zone. So we're located over here on the West Bench, just near the intersection of Corey Lane and Maple Grove, surrounded by other residential uses and a religious institution to the south. And before getting into the details, it's probably important to note that this subdivision is planned to provide home ownership opportunities to families making less than 80% of AMI. The applicant has partnered with the city to provide both initial assistance to home buyers, as well as continued monitoring to ensure owner occupancy of these homes. As you can see here, the property itself is split zoned between R1C and R1B. And with their decision last month, the Planning and Zoning Commission did approve of a general exception to apply the R1C standards across the entire property. Also included was a planned unit development for reduced dimensional standards, which resulted in the layout you see here on the right. Really, the only point of discussion during the commission hearing was how best to set up these landscape buffers you see here highlighted along Corey Lane and Maple Grove. So typically code requires these buffers to be 30 feet wide along arterials and 20 feet wide along collectors, planted with street trees and fully irrigated and also maintained by a homeowners association. Due to the affordable housing nature of this project and somewhat limited property size, The applicant has asked to place these buffers into easements rather than common lots and have individual homeowners be responsible for their maintenance. So after a fair bit of discussion, the commission ultimately recommended that these only be 10 feet wide, but that they do remain in common lots to be maintained by a homeowners association. They also recommended that the buffer along Maple Grove be permitted to use rock mulch and decorative boulders to reduce the cost of upkeep for future homeowners. And also note that the fencing would be located on the interior side of those lot lines rather than along the roads. So with those recommended conditions of approval, the commission did find that the applicant's proposal was consistent with the standards of approval and requirements of all reviewing agencies and departments. And as such, they recommended approval of the preliminary and final plats.
Any questions for staff?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. It's hard to tell if the sidewalk is being proposed, the attached sidewalk is existing or if it's being built with this. It looks like it's being built. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council President, along Quarry Lane, actually here we can show. So this top image here is a photo of along Maple Grove. So there's existing attached sidewalk that would remain. And then that bottom photo there is Quarry Lane, which does not have any improvements. So those would be going in. It would be a 7-foot attached sidewalk.
Thank you. So is there a reason we didn't ask for that sidewalk to be detached and then that landscape strip could be outside the sidewalk in the right of way?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I think with this one, in an effort to reduce some of the costs to the developer and applicant, we just went along with what ACHD's basic requirements were for street improvements along those frontages.
Okay. Guess I'm not convinced that it's cheaper to build it attached than detached if we're going to require the landscape strip in addition. So would ask that during is this a final?
It is.
During between now and when the permits are issued, if you review that, if there's any way to change it, if it's not a different cost.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So do we have Abby Stover or Kathy Venrick?
Madam Mayor, you have both Abby and Kathy online.
Great.
This is Abby. I have a PowerPoint I'd like to share, if that's all right.
Yes, we're setting it up so that we can see you now. And
Okay.
You
Oh,
should
it looks like
soon
I
be
can
able
share.
to share. Great.
Yep.
Just Abby, if you'll wait just a second, Matt, just a second, Abby. Matt, if you're in the tech room, oh, there we go. Good. The screens hadn't all moved to Abby, but now they have. Go ahead.
All right. Can you guys see a PowerPoint slide for me? Oh, yeah, it looks like you can. All right. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about those common lots that Kevin touched on. Let me get my slide up here. Yeah, so again, to reiterate, this is an affordable housing project. We're going to provide 9 single-family homes for those making 80% of the area median income through a partnership with City of Boise's affordable housing program. The homeowners will receive up to $100,000 in purchase assistance as determined by the city's program. And it will be required that this is a primary residence and the compliance will be monitored by the city. So I just wanted to explain a little bit more about why we're asking for those common lots to be waived. So having common lots creates a financial burden on the homeowners, especially with such a small project, with there only being 9 lots in this development. So an HOA would need to be created and funded to own and maintain those common lots for the landscape buffers. And since it's such a small development, a property management company would need to be hired to maintain those common lots. There would also be utility costs to provide power and water to maintain that landscaping. So the estimated cost to each homeowner would be a minimum of $100 per lot per month, which comes to $1,200 per year for each homeowner. And that's the minimum that we have estimated for that. So it could even be higher. And that $1,200, it almost equates to another mortgage payments for these 9 affordable housing homeowners. So the preferred option that we had proposed in our original submittal for the preliminary plat was to put those easements within common lots and include them in each of the buildable lots. So lot 1 and lot 9 would have the Quarry Lane buffer as part of their lot. It would be outside of their backyard fence, and there would be trees and grass provided there. The Maple Grove one, our proposal would be to have that buffer still in an easement, but have the fence on the outside. And so the landscape buffer would be within the lot. It wouldn't provide landscaping as much to Maple Grove, but it would provide an extra buffer area for those lots. So we would propose that the fence is 2 feet behind the sidewalk, and that those buffer areas are contained within those lots. There is a code section that allows the buffer areas to be in an easement. As you can see here, it has larger minimum lot sizes than we are proposing. It has 130 feet depth and an 80-foot width. So we would request a variance to that part of the code. If that first option is not something that will work, our second preferred option would be that those are still in easements, but we would consider moving the fence to the back of the easement along Maple Grove to provide a better pedestrian experience along Maple Grove. But we would have only the rock mulch and boulders that P&Z requested along Maple Grove, just to eliminate the maintenance on this road. The last option that is what P&Z has requested, but is our non-preferred option, would be to have these in common lots. Again, the cost associated with that it's just a burden for these owners that are trying to, maintain their lots, and the additional cost is a hindrance to that. So that's all I have. So in conclusion, the common lots create a financial burden to the homeowners. Easements, either option 1 or option 2, would be our preferred request. And I'll stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor. Thanks, Abby. One question on option 3 versus the other 2 options is, I understand option 3 is a little more expensive because it will require an HOA and it will require some amount of dues to support the maintenance of the buffer. But presumably, if the landowners are maintaining those spaces privately, they're still incurring a cost to maintain them. Have you done any work to figure out what that cost would be? Because it's not really the difference between $0 and $100. It's the difference between whatever it costs them to maintain it privately versus whatever it costs them to maintain it through an HOA.
Yeah, that is correct. It wouldn't be a zero maintenance option, but for our preferred option, it would be like they're maintaining just a little more yard area. And I don't have an exact cost for you, but it would be minimal compared to having to pay an HOA, accounting and all that's the additional that comes with having that property management company.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, one follow-up.
Mhm.
The easement space, who holds the easement? I should know that, but I don't. So thank you.
Yeah, I guess I don't know the exact answer for that. It would just be reserved on the plat as a landscape easement. So as far as I know, no one would hold it to say, but it would be reserved for that lot and limited to only landscaping in that area.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby.
Madam Mayor.
Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Abby. I'm too grappling with the cost associated with maintaining these common lots. Is it required that an HOA hire a professional company to maintain those, or could the residents, as members of the HOA, pool their labor resources and take care of those collectively?
It would not be required that there is a property management company, but typically with this few number of lots, getting an HOA up and running and maintained, we just figured that's an additional burden on these affordable houses, and asking that of such a small group is why the property management company would be brought in. Kathy Venrick, I think, is on this. She is with Autumn Gold Senior Services, and she might have a better answer for you on that if she gets a chance to answer that. Is Kathy on, and could she hop in?
I am on here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep, we can.
Okay. So I think that the complication with not having a HOA, a management company manage that HOA, is that you're then relying on 9 houses that have never even been homeowners to try and figure out how to manage an HOA, make sure they pay the taxes, the utilities, get the maintenance done. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just they have to file taxes for it. They have to do a lot of things that I think would probably be outside of what I wouldn't say they're not capable, but they probably don't have the experience to do that. And I think it would be asking a lot for new homeowners, especially of just 9 houses, to figure that out. It's not typical for homeowners to manage their own HOA. That would be unusual.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess follow up on that. I guess you say it's not typical, but in fact, I know a lot of HOAs that are 30 or 40 years old where it's very, very typical. And it seems like there's to me, a really easy fix that the homeowners who are adjacent to this property mow it along with their other yard, as well as water it in return for something, whatever that's worth over the year from the rest of the residents. And it would be pretty minimal, I would guess. But so anyway, I think there's a solution here, short of not having common lots and short of having each homeowner spend $1,200 a year. That sounds like an awful lot of money to me for a very small amount of land to maintain. I have a question though, beyond that. You are showing an attached sidewalk on Corey Lane, and wondering why you chose to attach that. One of the solutions to this, the homeowners would still have to maintain it, which is what I do with the parking strip in front of my house, but that you detach the sidewalk and put the trees and the grass on the street edge where it protects the people walking on it, makes it a much more pleasant place to be. Did you consider that? Our staff said that was more expensive. I'm struggling with why that would be more expensive.
So another issue with the sidewalk being detached is that there's an existing attached sidewalk on both sides of this property. There's a little bit here at the Corey Lane and Maple Grove corner, and then right next to our property is also attached. So it would be we'd have to jog it out just for our single property, and it wouldn't really go with the rest of the neighborhood that has the attached sidewalk along that street.
All right, thank you. That makes sense.
Anything else? All right. Is there anybody here from the public to testify on this one? Okay, I'll go ahead and, Abby, if you have any closing comments you'd like to make.
Yeah, I just had one more thing on, so even if we have the common lots and have the homeowners maintain it and not have a property management company, there's still the issue that an HOA needs to be formed to own these and pay the utilities and pay the taxes and all of those things. So it is the maintenance cost that is an issue, and it's also the ownership that is the other issue with the common lots.
Thanks. Anything further?
Madam Mayor, one more
Yeah.
question. If we were going to go to the homeowner-owned buffer areas on an easement, what's the requirement for the shy distance from whatever fence is built from the sidewalk? And I ask that because I see an awful lot of attached sidewalks around town that then have a fence right on the back of them. And so your effective width of that sidewalk ends up being about 3.5 feet. And on a road like Maple Grove, that would be extremely uncomfortable and unsafe.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, there is actually a section in code that I have up here. If Matt, we could take a look at it real quick. That speaks to those dimensions of where the fencing should be in relationship to the sidewalk. So if you look at item 4 there and 4B, a minimum of 5 feet from the back of attached sidewalks. And then the other measurement there is D, so 15 feet from back of curb. So kind of taking those both into consideration, looking at the site itself provides us some direction.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
I'll try a motion here. I would move that we approve the Workland subdivision SUB 21-16 preliminary and final plat at 9009 West Quarry Lane with a change in the condition that there be an HOA and common lots and that we allow those to be in easements to be maintained by the adjacent homeowner as long as the perimeter landscape buffer conditions as currently stated are maintained.
Second.
We have a motion, a second discussion.
Madam Mayor, I'm afraid I didn't quite understand the motion, Council President. So can you explain what you're getting at with the HOA and who is doing the maintenance?
You bet. It does seem, I think, unnecessary to create an HOA for 9 lots, just so that they can maintain about 100 square feet of landscaping. And yet, I often see when these are put in easement that the homeowner takes over that easement for their own use. If it is truly an easement, then it should be available as an easement. And so the perimeter landscape buffer conditions that are presented here, I think, provide for that.
Does that include the location?
5 feet from the back of the sidewalk before you can put a fence.
Got it. Thank you. Madam Mayor, to follow up, my thinking on this was I'm very sensitive to and understand the cost and expense issue. The goal here is affordability. But if we're going to do away with common lots and do away with any sort of formalized way of structuring and guaranteeing their maintenance and perpetuity, and instead give that space to the neighbor in their yard and rely on them to maintain it, really, I think what we'd be saying is the buffer is optional, that over time, the property owner can manage it how they see fit, and they can choose to maintain the buffer or they cannot, because there's no formal structure there to ensure, in perpetuity, it's maintained. So the tension that I had in my mind was how to make this affordable to the property owners while also not kind of doing what would amount to a wink and a nod at the buffer requirement by just putting it on the honor system. And I think the council president's motion does that. So I'll vote for it.
Thank you.
Other comments? All right, well, before a vote, I'll just say that to highlight, this is the Autumn Gold subdivision that was highlighted today by our housing team as an affordability proposal that was, it's 9 units that are for workforce level housing, workforce level income, so 80% of area median income. And as we've said, like unit by unit, it's important to increase not only housing availability in the city, but affordable housing availability. And so I appreciate the partnership that this Autumn Gold, the developer of Autumn Gold has had with the city. And just want to thank you for the work that you put in to make this possible.
Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you for being mindful and offering those options. It didn't take into consideration that folks are endeavoring to be homeowners for the first time and that we're wanting to set them up for success. And so thank you for the motion, Council President, and thank you, staff.
Hey, clerk, will you go ahead and call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right. Next up, we have an appeal. And so I imagine all of you are here for that. I've got a list of people that are here to testify. Is the original applicant here in the building? Okay, great. And then the appellant, is that you? I don't mean, sorry to point. And then I imagine that there are also some folks on Zoom. I hear that there are quite a few. So what we're going to do is we'll go through the procedures, but before we go into it, 2 people signed up this evening that are not parties of record according to our records. And so if you disagree, I'd ask that you use this time to show us where you testified before, because in an appeal, only people that testified in the first hearing at planning and zoning are allowed to testify at the city council hearing. And those 2 folks that signed up that we don't have in our list of parties of record are Holly Leonard. Stephen Leonard is an official party of record. Okay. Holly Leonard and then Janelle Martin. Janelle. Okay. All right. Thank you. And so just wanted you to know before we got started that there's that technical issue. And then for those, we haven't checked, for those of you that are online, because we haven't asked you to raise your hand yet, we haven't checked to see if you're a party of record. So as you raise your hand, when we move to the online people wanting to testify online, we'll just confirm that you're a party of record before calling you or as we're calling you up. And with that, I'm going to ask, I think we'll start with folks here in the room and then we'll move on into Zoom. So Cody, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This item is an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval of a conditional use permit for a 270-unit multifamily development. The project is addressed at 2454 East Gowan Road, which, as you can see here, is located just northeast of the Federal Way and Gowan intersection, a regional activity center. The roughly 11-acre site is a combination of zoning. It's primarily C4 planned commercial, and then the remainder is R2 or medium density residential, both with design review. This combination of zoning would allow over 400 units on this property. At 270 units, the proposed development is at about 24 units an acre. The item was heard and unanimously approved by the Planning Commission in April. As detailed in the packet, a multifamily residential development is certainly supported by the comprehensive plan. It's compatible with the mix of uses in the area that includes adjacent multifamily residential development and commercial uses. However, as you can see, and again, the decision has been appealed, which is why we're here this evening. The appeal focused on things you often hear with projects like this: traffic, circulation, height, and parking. As it relates to height, the commission's approval did allow for a slight increase. Specifically, the elevator towers in the larger buildings would be increased from 45 to 48 feet. It also allowed an increase from 35 to 40 feet on the smaller buildings. In both instances, this is not, as you can see, for the entire buildings, but just a small portion of each structure. As you can see in the memoranda, the appellant provided a general objection to the height, but did not appear to identify how this relatively minor increase in height was an error. They also didn't appear to identify how other properties would be negatively impacted by this very minor increase in height. As it relates to parking, the applicant is proposing roughly 450 spaces where 344 are required. From a staff perspective, if anything, we believe it might make sense to provide less parking and more housing on a site like this. But again, we don't see where there was an error as it relates to parking. It does meet the objective standards of the development code. The final item mentioned in the appeal relates to circulation, and that's something I think we need to be very mindful of. This site has been vacant for some time. The only development that has occurred, as you can see, is just the installation of a simple service drive across this property. This drive historically provided relatively uninhibited access to and from that adjacent commercial shopping center. We certainly acknowledge that development of this property is going to slow access through the site. Drivers that could previously travel through here, essentially unrestricted, will be inconvenienced. That alone is not an error. The primary purpose of this 11-acre site was certainly not simply to function as a service drive. It was always going to be developed, and cross-access will be retained with this project. I would also note that the traffic generated from this project will be far less than other commercial uses that could occupy the site. That being said, the applicant does have some work to do. Through the design review process, it'll be important that we look at how that cross-access drive is treated. We need to look at things like changes in materials, colors and paving and signage. All of these combined to make sure that residents of the project and those traversing the site to the shopping center remain safe. I would also point out just briefly, as you can see here, drivers do have options through cross-access that we've achieved in the past. Access to 2 full-service intersections, controlled intersections, will still be available. Customers, employees, and delivery drivers will certainly have to change their behavior, but this site and the adjacent site can still be accessed safely. As a result, we don't see where there's been an error identified in this regard. So with that, we believe the commission's decision was based on the evidence in the record that included testimony by the appellants and other neighbors. And so absent any error, we are recommending denial of the appeal this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would just ask that members of the audience keep their nonverbal comments to a minimum. I think it's really rude to snicker when our very professional staff is presenting to us.
Right, are there questions for staff?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Cody, in this image you have up on the screen, there is access from the parking lot of the commercial area onto Gowan Road, eastbound. I think I'm looking at that little light gray lower left corner right there. Yeah, it looks like that's where, cars would exit and then into the street. Is that, it's not the subject property here, but is that going to be maintained? Is it still going to be there? Vehicles can still exit the commercial center through there?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, that's a access, basically a deceleration lane from the road into the shopping center. It's not on the subject property, but in the right of way and will remain.
Okay, so there are plenty of ways to get into the shopping center. And then I wish we could zoom out on this picture. That's okay. Oh, thank you. As proposed, the only ways out are through the proposed neighborhood or to the east or back out kind of across the parking lots to the west. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, you can go through the project out to the controlled intersection here. You also have, as it relates to the shopping center, there's an access point here. And then an additional access here, a controlled intersection with a light, and then access to that here through the shopping center.
Okay, thank you, Cody.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Cody, thank you. So one of the things that I saw was that the appellant didn't feel like the traffic impacts were adequately reviewed by the commission. And it looks like there was a study that was done by ITD. It looks like there wasn't a study that was done by ACHD. However, I'm trying to figure out, it looks like maybe there had been a previous study that had been done by ACHD for a larger commercial unit. Can you just kind of talk to that a little bit so I can better understand the ACHD study aspect?
Certainly, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, the applicant was required to do a new traffic impact study that was transmitted some time ago to both ACHD and ITD. ITD commented because Gowan out there is a state highway and had no objection. ACHD has yet to comment. However, the traffic counts themselves for residential use, and I get the numbers are significantly lower than would be that they're less for the residential use than a commercial use that could be developed on the property. We do still have that additional stopgap where the project still requires design review. So if ACHD wanted to place additional conditions on the project, they certainly could do so.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you, Cody. I know that this frontage drive is well used today. My question is this: would we typically allow front-end parking on a roadway that is traveled, or would we require either diagonal or parallel parking on that kind of a roadway?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, there's nothing prohibits it in code, but certainly given the traffic that crosses this site and the number of parking spaces, that's something we could still work through. They are, as I rattled off the numbers, significantly overparked. So a change to diagonal parking of some kind can certainly be accommodated and still meet the parking requirements for the development.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Cody, you said that the traffic it's much less than what could go on this site. Is that in reference to the idea that they could do 400 units? And is there additional things that could go here that would also increase that traffic if it was approached that way?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, the commercial, just finding the numbers here, the commercial development that was approved there back in 95, it looks like was 86,000 square feet, which would generate about 280 trips per hour. The residential project at the density that was approved by the commission, the 270 units, is only 168 trips per hour, so significantly less. Obviously, if this were to come back at a higher density, we would certainly increase the trip count, but nowhere near that commercial rate. And I think it's important to note, that in terms of multifamily residential development, placing it almost across the street from a major employer and next to a grocery store, there's certainly an opportunity for some trip capture, and that was noted by the commission in approving this.
Madam Mayor, I did have one more question for staff. So in the commission meeting, I think that the height did come up and they did talk about it a little bit. And from what I read, and then from the presentation, it looks like 3 to 5 feet is sort of the variance. So it's a little bit higher in some areas, but not all. And when they were addressing the compatibility, the discussion at the commission was that not only is that height not significant and not on a lot of buildings, but because the setbacks were further in, it had less of a height effect than if the setbacks were closer to the road. Am I understanding that's how the conversation for compatibility went?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, yeah, I think that's an accurate summary of the discussion. As you can see here, the portions in red are those portions, minor portions of the building that exceed the height. And then if we translate that to the site, you'll see we have the buildings, the larger buildings significantly set back from the perimeter. And then that adjoining property, it's across the parking lot and beyond a series of carports from what is ultimately the residential structures clear back here.
So Madam Mayor, just quick follow-up. So I guess on that kind of northwest spot where the arrows are pointing at those blue buildings, those don't necessarily have a significant setback from the property line, but have a setback with the extra buffer from the parking lot from where the residents would live on the other side from where the actual housing is.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that's a good way to summarize it. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, it looks like that's it for now. We'll have the appellants. Is it the appellants next, Rob? Yeah. Okay. We'll have the appellants up now. I see three listed here: Stephen Leonard, David Becker, and Anthony Fandino. All right, so the three of you are combining your time. Great. All right. So before we get started, I noticed that Jordan Morales signed up in advance to be online, but Jordan, we don't have you listed as a party of record. And if you'll just let the clerk know if you are on there that if you think differently, just let the clerk know via chat if that's possible. But I just wanted to give you that advance warning. Thanks for joining us. Okay, and with that, come on up. So the timer will start and then I'll leave it to the three of you to figure out how you're doing your thing in the 10 minutes you've got.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor McLean and council members. One quick diversion, the question that Councilmember Badgett asked, that little road that was down in the lower left-hand corner at present is a one-way entrance. It's not an exit. It's a deceleration lane off Highway 21, and traffic comes in there. Almost no one tries to go out.
Okay, thanks.
We have serious concerns about parts of this proposed project, which David is going to present momentarily, backed up with some very carefully recorded data that he spent several days tabulating. I just want to emphasize two critical points ahead of time, which somewhat contrast with the presentation that we've just heard. While ITD did approve the overall project, and ACHD presumably will, the studies that were done did not take into account the inevitable chaos that would ensue if that access road were significantly impeded or closed off. The entire Columbia Village community has become dependent on it, as have many, many residents of Surprise Valley and even people off Warm Springs exiting that way, as well as hundreds of cars going up to the lakes on weekends. Closing or impeding the traffic flow on that access would be a major hardship and would adversely affect the businesses in the shopping center as well. And secondly, allowing high-density residential development in an area that was previously zoned commercial and intended for commercial development, and then allowing wholesale variations to the height restrictions, which residential housing would be subject to, kind of makes a mockery of the zoning process. My two partners own businesses in the Columbia Village marketplace and are very appreciative of the increased business that they will be receiving. For those of us who simply live there, the community would have been much better served by the commercial development, shops, restaurants, for which the property was originally zoned and intended at the time that the district was laid out. More high-density rental housing will, as it does everywhere, and as the existing apartments already have, lead to more crime and congestion. It's heartbreaking to see what out-of-control housing is doing to Boise, out-of-control development. I grew up in New York City and knew I never wanted to live like that. Fell in love with Denver in the 1960s as a teenager, watched it develop, get crowded, get congested, and become more like New York. As a young adult, I settled in Phoenix and watched development turn it from a sparkling, friendly, and wonderfully livable city to another congested, polluted, crime and traffic plagued metropolis. It breaks my heart to see that happening here. I hope that you can temper your enthusiasm for development at least somewhat and take into account the reason why so many people live in Boise, which is exactly because it is not like New York. The planning and zoning process often seems to consider the well-being of everyone except the existing residents of the neighborhoods being developed. The last year has shown the cost of high-density housing in susceptibility to pandemics and in susceptibility to social unrest, which has resulted from the pandemic. So I just ask you to take those things into account and include the proposed changes to this project, which David is going to outline and support with his data. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the Boise City Council, thank you for letting me present this today. My name is David Becker, and I'm a resident of 6250 South Basalt Trail, and I live in Columbia Village. I'm also the owner of Cafe Capri, which is at 2242 East Gowan Road, which is in the Columbia Marketplace. I first attended the Planning and Zoning meeting on April 12th, and I had only one topic I wished to address when I did that. But since then, I feel that I need to address a couple of other things as well. I have 3 topics that I like to do. Topic number 1 is the use of the current access road, which is my primary concern that I attended for, because I'm actually all for the subdivision or this apartment complex. Next is the height restrictions. And the third topic is the direction the Planning and Zoning Committee gave the applicant at the end of the meeting. Topic number 1 is the current access road. I asked the City Council to direct the applicant to reduce the impact of the public by keeping the access road open during the construction of the complex. We understand the possibility of short-term closures during the actual construction of the road, but to reduce the impact to the community and to limit the impact to our businesses, we ask that you direct the applicant to close those roads at the shortest possible times so that it's not closed during the entire construction. The applicant presented multiple times during the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting that they plan to take actions to impede and discourage the use of the access road, which has been used by the public for approximately 21 years. I have lived there for 21 years and it's been there. They mentioned that 6 times in their, I think, 10-minute conversation that they plan to impede and I forget what the other word was off the top of my head. But anyway, they wanted to impede that so that to reduce the traffic that was flowing on there. Here's my argument, and I think I have a way to advance this. Yes. On this slide that you're seeing in front of you, this shows an aerial view of the Columbia Marketplace. As you can see that there are currently 3 points highlighted in green, and those all provide 2-way unrestricted access into and out of the complex. There are 2 points that are highlighted in red, and one of them provides only entry, and that is the one that was mentioned by Councilman Patrick Pageant earlier today. The other one is access limited in green, provides only red, which is entry number 4, and that provides only right turn access into it and right turn access out of it. First, I want to address the unrestricted access. Entry number 1 is the main entrance to Federal Way. Entry number 2 is the entry off of Lake Forest Boulevard, and that actually does provide easy access to turn left and right. But in order to get to that, really the only way to do that is to pass through the front of the shopping complex. And it is also used as the exit point or one of the exit points for the apartment complex that's behind the Albertson Shopping Center. Entry number 3 is the access road that we have in question today. And let's see, the restricted access, I call that the bank access. This allows a right-hand turn to go into it and also a right-hand turn to leave, but it doesn't allow you to go left and to get out of the complex very easily. In fact, in many cases, I was down there watching it the other day, and there was a huge tractor trailer that went through there and had no idea that he couldn't turn left, and then he had to back up and then go another route to get out of there. So it does cause some problems from time to time. Entry number 5 is Idaho Highway 21 entry. This is an entry only and allows access from westbound vehicles on Idaho 21 to enter the complex. My next slide here is an unofficial traffic survey that I conducted from 5/27 to 5/31. There's no specific rhyme or reason on the dates or the times. I was just available at that time, and I tried to do an hour at each one of these to do it to provide some evidence to you. As you can see, the peak traffic flows, if you could see this chart, I realize it's a little bit of an eye chart. The minimum vehicles per hour was 127 up to 305 vehicles per hour. Large vehicles that traversed there through that time period was 7 to 22 vehicles per hour. This includes a large fuel truck, also carrying a tanker that goes through there. And I actually talked with that truck driver, and he said it would actually be very unsafe for him to go other places. I also talked with a Hayden beverage driver and a Pepsi truck driver, and they all said the same thing. They could maneuver other ways, but it would be unsafe for them to go through the main entrance or through entry number 2. Let's see, where are we at? The overall average peak was 235 vehicles per hour. The vehicles per minute was 3.9 vehicles per minute. And the large vehicle access on the average was 15 vehicles per minute. Let's see, slide number 3. This represents photos of the main entrance. This happens to be right at Gowan Road, and there is no traffic lights that controls this. If you're looking at the 2 pictures on the left, this is the main entrance exit and entry. This is actually depicting the traffic congestion that occurs there now, even with that access road being opened and having full access to it. The picture that you see on the right-hand side is actually from near the Sinclair gas station and from those businesses off to the right of that. And as you can see, there is a line, that little arrow is actually way in the back over next to a tree next to that exit. So I wanted to give you an idea of how much congestion is right there.
Right. So your time is up. I will give the group 12 minutes. It means the applicant gets 12 minutes. So that means you have 1 minute and 49 seconds
Okay.
left.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
But that means for the third appellant as
We're
well.
combined together.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very much. And I understand. Slide number 4. This just represents if you had to travel to entry number 2, there are 3 crosswalks that are there already. And as you know, those crosswalks are heavily used. And if we had to divert some of that traffic over there to entry number 2, that could cause some congestion problems. And we also know that people don't, adhere to those crosswalks very well. All right. And my proposal is that we instruct the applicant to limit their road closures during the construction to help the ease of the traffic. We ask that they reduce the planned parking by about 50% on that traffic road or on that access road. We also ask them to angle the parking spaces at 45 degrees in the direction of the traffic so that they can easily get in and out without impeding the traffic. And we also ask that you add bicycle lanes to both sides. On the adjoining road, Grand Forest, on both sides of the road, there's bicycle lanes. And actually, I was quite surprised when I did the survey, the number of bicycles that use it. And because I'm short on time, the height restrictions my only concern is C4D, and I'm not a professional at these zoning laws or anything like that. But it appears that the C4D is zoned at 45 feet rather than 35 feet. And all we're saying is basically, if you're putting commercial in there, it's 45 feet. If you're putting residential property in there, maybe it needs to be rezoned to R2, which is 35 feet, and that's what should be applied as the standard. If there's different rules for that, I'm just not aware of them, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
30-second warning.
All right,
Thanks.
and that's all I
You can
have.
pause it now while they switch people.
Hey, Madam Mayor. Just real quick, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do your own traffic studies. It seems like you spent a lot of time doing that. So I've done those before for bicycles, and I know the effort that takes. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you also bringing potential solutions to the table.
All right, thank you, sir. Oh, yes.
My name is Anthony Fondino. I own the UPS store in Marketplace. My main concerns follow with David's. We want to see growth. We want more customers, obviously, but we want to see it done right. And
Can you come a little closer to the mic
Sorry.
just for the record? Thanks.
My main concern is safety. Right now, that exit is the safest way to exit if you're going up Highway 21. If boats, trailers, RVs aren't going to be going that way, they're going to be crossing an intersection without a light. I just see it. I see an accident every weekend. I think there's a better way to do it. I'm not an expert. I don't know how to do it, but I think getting rid of that road and limiting the traffic flow, especially with tractor trailers, is going to be horrible. And what is the future going to be? If people are not going to go to our shopping center because it's too hard to get out of, is that going to affect our business?
Right, thank you. Are there questions For the appellant?
Madam Mayor, I think that this is probably a question for Cody, actually. So I understand that this thoroughfare over this piece of property is often used. Who owns it and who maintains it currently? Is it in a public easement? Is it a public right of way, or is it just an informal access?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, it's on private property. It's on the applicants on the subject property. There is a recorded easement across this that requires that access to be maintained, but it is on the applicant's property.
But there is a recorded easement.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have you up again. Okay, Brandon, come on up. Welcome back. Nice to see you in person. So you've got 12 minutes.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you so much for the opportunity for us to share our plans for what we are calling the Canyon Ridge Apartments that was unanimously approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 12th. This slide shows the vicinity of where the subject property is located. The subject property is identified by the blue cloud there. And the green arrows show the two access points, or the two closest access points to Micron facilities. The star in the intersection of Federal Way and Gowan annotates the Regional Activity Center. And the red line shows the proximity of I-84. As was mentioned, the Columbia Shopping Center is due west of the subject property. And when considering the appropriateness of citing a multifamily housing project, we think that this property is hitting a lot of the boxes very, very squarely. The plans that we have for this property, as was mentioned, is a 270-unit complex with the amenities of many different building types, a clubhouse, pool, hot tub, dog park, playgrounds for the children, and amazing views of Lucky Peak, the Boise front, as well as looking to the Hawaii's to the south. But what really inspires me is this is an opportunity to make an infill property productive, something that has sat vacant for the last 20 years, waiting for an opportunity to contribute to the neighborhood. I think that it's also exciting that this is a multifamily housing project that's located on the east side of town, close to emerging employment areas that will function to reduce vehicular miles traveled or even encourage non-motorized commuting to a workplace. So the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved this project on April 12th. The Boise City Code has established standards of review for an appeal. Those include the decision was in violation of state code or city laws. The decision was not in compliance with Blueprint Boise. The decision was not supported by substantial evidence. The decision was made upon unlawful procedure, or the decision was arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion that was made without rational basis. First standard, decision was in violation of state or city or state laws. The subject property is located primarily in the C4D zone with a portion located in the R2D zone. The intended uses, as stated in the Boise Development Code for the C4D zone, is to promote imaginative, innovative, and comprehensively planned commercial developments, medium to high density residential projects, or mixed use projects in predominantly commercial areas are also encouraged. Clearly, the approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission was not a violation of state or city laws. The next standard is the decision was not in compliance with the Blueprint Boise plan. Per the staff report that was generated for the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, several citywide vision, policies, and community structure and design elements were implemented into the submitted plan drawings. Clearly, the approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission was in compliance with the Blueprint Boise plan. The next standard is the decision was not supported by substantial evidence. At the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, materials submitted for their consideration included site plans, building elevations, floor plans, landscape plans, and they received public testimony both for and against the project. The approval rendered by the Planning and Zoning Commission was made in consideration of substantial evidence that was submitted on behalf of the application. The next standard is that the decision exceeds the Planning and Zoning Commission statutory authority. Per the Boise City Code, the Planning and Zoning Commission is the decision-making authority for conditional use permits and planned unit developments over 2 acres in area, and also to allow variances in height. The approval rendered by the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 12th, 2021 was within their statutory authority. The next standard is that the decision was made upon unlawful procedure. Prior to the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the following procedures were met. There was a pre-application meeting with city planning staff. There was a neighborhood meeting with all landowners and tenants located within 300 feet of the subject property. A complete application was submitted on February 23rd. Radius notice was mailed to properties within 300 feet on March 26th. Newspaper notification was published on March 26th, and notice was posted on the property on March 26th. All of the required procedures were met prior to the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. The next standard is that the decision was arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion. At the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, staff presented the facts associated with the application. The commission then opened a public hearing and received testimony associated with the application. The commission then conducted due deliberations upon all information presented. They found that the use was suitable for the subject property, adhering to the applicable code requirements, and supported by the Blueprint Boise Plan. The approval by the Boise Planning and Zoning Commission was not arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion. The above referenced standards review of appeal represent the grounds for an appeal of a decision that was rendered by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Upon reviewing those standards, the City Council must determine the following. If an error is found, the City Council may reverse or modify the Planning and Zoning Commission. If no error is found, the appeal should be denied and the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision upheld. Based upon the facts presented, we believe there was not an error in the approval of CUP-00006 and respectfully request that this appeal be denied and the Planning and Zoning Commission's unanimous decision of approval be upheld. I would also like to add a response to some comments that the appellants made with regards to the road. It is on our property, but there is a perpetual easement in place for there to be continual access from the shopping center to Grand Forest Boulevard. So through the construction process, we will build the realigned road before we decommission the existing road. So access through the property will be maintained through the entire construction process. And also there was mention of we would like to incorporate traffic calming measures into that drive aisle through the use of materials and painting and possibly bulbs to reduce pedestrian crossing, well, to heighten the awareness of pedestrian crossings and reduce the length that they have to get across the drive aisle so they can do so in a safer manner. So with that, I would request that you uphold the decision that was rendered by the Planning and Zoning Commission and deny the appeal. And I would stand for any questions that you may have.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for that. I've heard from both our city staff and from the appellant. One particular thing from both was the parking, and I was wondering what your thoughts were in terms of why so much parking when it sounds like it might be a bit much.
Madam Mayor McLean, Councilmember Thompson, there's really a balancing act that is performed in trying to find what the unit mix will be, studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, how many parking spaces for each of those different unit types, and where that parking is located on the property so that everybody has good ample parking close to where their residence is located. In this instance, we have exceeded the minimum parking standard, but we've tried very hard to distribute the parking throughout the entire property in close proximity to the various buildings that are on the property. So we don't feel that we've overparked it based upon the need and the layout of the 270 units on the property.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, one other question. Could you speak to the idea of the biking lanes? Adding biking lanes?
Madam Mayor, Member Thompson, I think that would be a great idea. And as we go through the design review process, I know that that will be something that we look very hard at seeing if we can incorporate that into the site plan.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So just a question about the road going through there. You mentioned that a new road would be constructed with the alignment that would be one of the first things that would be done. And that's really the road that we're seeing on the image here, where it would be going through and there would be cars that would be parked perpendicular to the road along a stretch. That's the road you're referring to there, correct?
Madam Mayor, Member Halliburton, yes, that is correct.
Okay, great.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. Good to see you, Brandon. Question about the road. You've designed this much like a service drive in a typical development, but it functions much differently than that. What other design did you look at when you looked at how to do this particular access?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, good to see you as well. We looked at many different alignments, and our base level concern was that this had to be maintained to provide the access from the Grand Forest Boulevard into the shopping center. And that's not only for the residents, but also the service vehicles. It actually needs to be 30 feet wide of a paved surface, so it will actually become wider. We tried to, I do have a slide at the tail end of our presentation that shows our realignment. And we chose this because it actually functions much better than the current alignment, which aligns with the road across the street, of which you would typically want to see. But the apartment complex to the north of us actually uses our property for their access onto Grand Forest Boulevard. So we are actually thought that combining the two access points so that there's one access point would help it function better and also give a longer queue length to the light on Gowan Road or Highway 21. So those were the elements that we thought that might help this function better. And we incorporated that design into our site plan.
Follow up?
Yep.
Thank you. I am quite familiar with it, having attended any number of soccer and baseball games at this location. So the alignment, I think, I agree with you. I think the alignment itself may work quite a lot better than what is currently there. My question is the parking on the drive itself and the front-end parking on what is quite a busy access road, and wondered if you considered angled or parallel parking. As I'm counting the spaces, if you went to parallel parking on both sides, you'd still be able to get about 60 or 65 spaces. And so you'd only lose 30 or 40 potentially, maybe not even that many, and you would potentially get more green space around your common area. Wondered if you had considered that.
I can't say that we have considered that, but I know that we do have some final design elements to address before we submit for design review. And I think that that is a very competent or a very sane thing to consider on our behalf, is what can we gain with the angled parking? How many parking spaces do we lose? And to talk to a traffic consultant on how much that reduces traffic conflicts, as well as parallel parking instead of perpendicular, and see if we can find a good balance between not losing too many parking spaces, but creating a more safe environment for both pedestrians and vehicles using that road.
Thank you. Two more questions, if I might. The question on the height variance, as I understand it, the only places you're asking for any variances are to take care of the top of the stairways or some of the mechanical features. Is that correct? It's not the roof itself.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, you're exactly right. It's only the elements of the stairs in the larger building and the elevator shaft in the smaller buildings. And it actually helps articulate the roof form a touch. So it adds visual interest, and we believe it actually made the buildings visually more appealing.
Thank you. And then final question, if I might. Who maintains the green space along Highway 21 and that sidewalk that is there? Is that an HHD feature or is that maintained by the marketplace or by you?
I was under the impression you're talking about the property that is
Between yours and Highway 21, so where the sidewalk is?
I believe that's ITD's right away.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes.
So my question was aimed at the idea that although that's only a 6-foot sidewalk, it looks like it'd be relatively easy to widen to 12-foot and make a multi-use pathway there. Frankly, would be a lot safer for bicyclists and putting them on the service lane. I don't know if that's something you could look into, but.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, we will reach out to ITD, ensure that that is their right of way and see their receptivity to adding a bike lane in that area.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We'll stop if we're here another hour and a half, we'll stop after an hour and a half. So we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll start to hear from those of you in the room.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started again. Welcome back, everybody. So on this list, it looks as though I don't have anybody in this room other than those of you that have testified or signed up and can't testify on this list. So instead, I'm going to just, ma'am, start over. People didn't sign up, but you're here to speak. Are you planning on speaking this evening? And I'm just gonna give you a chance to, ma'am, hello, you in the white shirt. I couldn't tell if you were kidding or not. Okay. The last time people were here and people didn't sign up, it was super inefficient. So I'm going to point at you, not in a rude way, but to call on you, have you come up. If you're party of record, you'll be able to testify, and then I'll point to the next person. And we're just going to go down. We're pretty much going to go aisle row by row like this. But I've just got to make sure you're party of record because I don't have your names here. So ma'am, are you party of record? Were you planning on testifying on the party of record list? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. All right. I'll come up here to the front. No. Okay. Applicant, you? Nope. All right, we got a full room of a whole bunch of spectators. Great. All right. It's great to have you all here. Okay, so I'm going to go then to the clerk. Here, if I'd known that, I actually wouldn't have had us take a break either. I think this might have been faster than I expected. I was thinking we were going to hear from all of you for 3 minutes. So would you like to see who's online?
Madam Mayor, we do have Rob Stark, who did sign up in advance.
Oh, great. Okay. And Rob Stark is a party of record. Great. Yeah. And I see that you did sign up in advance. Sorry about that. Rob, welcome. Is he there?
He is there. I am asking him to unmute.
Great.
Rob Stark, 6865 East Warm Springs Avenue, 83716. Madam Mayor, council members, I am not opposed to multifamily housing being built at this location and agree that there is a need for more housing in Boise. I, however, believe that the design of this development is flawed and has seriously failed to account for the amount and types of traffic that uses the easement across this property. The TIS submitted by the applicant that ACHD has said was flawed not just once but twice failed to take into account the number of vehicles using this easement to exit the shopping center. Co-appellant David Becker on May 25th between 5 and 6 p.m. counted 244 vehicles using this easement in a single hour. These are not just sedans and pickups, but also vehicles towing boat, snowmobile, and travel trailers, as well as semi-trucks making deliveries and pickups at the shopping center. The applicant has stated that they are going to use traffic calming, which will undoubtedly include speed bumps. If you've ever been around a semi going over a speed bump, it's noisy. This noise will severely impact the quality of life for the tenants of this development because of the amount and types of vehicles using this route. Stating that this is no different than driving through if it had been an expanded shopping center is misleading because a large volume of traffic is expected to be driving through the parking lot of a shopping center. This is not the case in a residential housing complex. No matter how many calming methods the developer uses, traffic will continue to use this route because it is the easiest access eastbound to Gowan Road. I sure would not have wanted to live in this development in the rental days of my youth. Finally, there are far more homes to the east of this development in Columbia Village, Surprise Valley, Barber Valley, and Boise County, plus the people heading to Lucky Peak and Boise County to recreate who use this easement to get to eastbound Gowan Road than there are proposed units in this development. One of the criteria in Blueprint Boise, policy CC1.1, addresses reducing vehicle miles traveled. If the applicant is successful in hazing and getting the traffic to exit to the north on Lake Forest, to wait at the signal to make a left onto Federal Way southbound, and then wait at another signal to make another left onto Gowan Road eastbound. When you look at the number of residents and vehicles that need to go eastbound on Gowan from the shopping center, you can see that it results in many more vehicle miles traveled, as well as idle time at the signals. This would make the development non-compliant with Blueprint Boise. The development needs to be redesigned to allow the continued egress from the shopping center without going right through the middle of the development. Thank you.
30-second warning.
Very well timed, Mr. Stark. Thank you. Any questions for Rob? All right. I just want to make sure that before we see if there's anybody else there, was anybody from Southeast Neighborhood Association on Zoom this evening? You can raise your little Zoom hand if you are.
No, Madam Mayor.
Great. Okay. Anyone else raising their hands to testify?
No, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Elaine Helderman.
I was about to ask. Yep, Elaine
You just
is
raised her hand.
great. Welcome, Elaine. We'll move you over so that you can, we can hear you.
Madam Mayor, she is online, but she is still muted.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
I'm so sorry. Well, thank
don't
you,
worry about it.
Mayor, City Council. I was just saying that I learned about the project on the Nextdoor app. Otherwise, I would have been unaware. And when I signed up for the Zoom meeting back in February, I wanted to listen and learn more about the project. I thought I might have missed a letter to area homeowners about this development, but when I asked, the rep of Hawkins said they sent letters to those that live within 300 feet. I really think the area should have been extended because a lot of people in Columbia Village will be affected by this project. I'm not against apartments being built, but I was dismayed to find out about how many units were planned. I think this is really high density for the area, and we will be affected by the increase of cars, traffic, increase of population to schools and public services. I'm disappointed that high density housing is being imposed on a neighborhood that has very few services, stores, and eateries. I voiced my opinion to Hawkins that I would like to see increased business and reduced apartments in this location. I still feel the same way. The parking situation, after listening tonight, just really seems like it's going to be a nightmare. Where are the tenants? How many visitor spaces? Where are the visitors going to park if they run out of spaces in the project? Where are they going to park? And in case of emergencies or evacuation, will access be adequate for fire, ambulance, and police? I'm becoming more concerned that the city continues to add housing, but infrastructure lags. Also, when Brandon mentioned the drive realignment further down on Grand Forest from where it currently is, wouldn't that be more difficult to see approaching cars if you want to make a left-hand turn? It just seems like a more dangerous spot. That being said, thank you for being able to speak about this matter. I appreciate being heard.
Thank you. Any questions for Elaine? All right. Thanks for joining us. That looks like the entire list of parties of record, if I'm correct. And are there others with their hands raised?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So now this is where I confuse the order again. Is it any questions for staff before we move into rebuttals? All right. Great. The applicant first.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to respond to the comments that we heard today. I would state that it is good to have the exchange of ideas. We've learned about the concerns that the neighbors had, and we'll go back to the drawing board and see if we can incorporate some of these ideas and designs into our plans as we move forward to the design review process in the event that you overturn the appeal or uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. Mr. Stark's comments talked about that he's not opposed to a multifamily development, but he's concerned about the number of cars that will be going through the drive aisle that is located on our property. We will be widening it. It's required to be 30 feet wide. We don't think that it's that wide at this point in time. That will encourage higher speeds. And so that's where we talked about trying to implement traffic calming measures. The easement is very descriptive in that speed bumps will not be allowed to be placed or used as a traffic calming measure. So we're looking at change of materials, painting, and the bulbing of crossings to help elevate the pedestrian crossings to make that a safer passage. So there won't be any speed bumps for the large vehicles to be making noise upon as they go through the site. With regards to Ms. Helperman's comments, this property has been available for commercial development for the last 20 years, and it just doesn't meet the criteria for landowners and or potential tenants to move forward with the business use on this site. And so we think that the next best use is this multifamily housing project. We're excited for it. We think that it provides a lot of opportunity on the east side of town where there's currently not a lot of multifamily housing projects available. And we're at this state today through a lot of collaboration with the planning and development staff, as well as the airport staff. This has been a long process. There were a lot of moving parts and a very complicated application, but we're very proud of the project that we are proposing before you today, and respectfully request that you deny the appeal and uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision rendered on April 12th. I would stand for any questions that you have at this time.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
One thing that I've been looking at with the map and the drawings is whether there's any way to route the access road essentially outside of the development, either to the south of it along the highway or not. And my non-professional read is that there's no way to do that while also having a safe intersection with Grand Forest. But I wonder if that's something that you looked at more carefully than I just did, sitting here trying to figure out how to solve the problem that I think it was Mr. Stark brought up.
Right. We have looked at that, and it becomes very circuitous, and then it becomes very consumptive on the land, and we have trouble laying out the buildings and having a circulation pattern for them because it almost acts as a different roadway system. So we've tried to incorporate it as safely as we can into the site design that you see before you today, and that we're moving it a little bit to the north so that way we can get some buildings to the south. But this is the best solution we have been able to achieve so far, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I anticipate the roadway being the discussion on a lot of these things, just because it does seem a little funky to have a roadway going through a multi-unit complex. I appreciate the presentation that you had earlier where you really kind of highlighted the discussion and the way that we have the ability to make decisions as far as the conversations that went on with planning and zoning and figure out if we are finding any error with those discussions. I guess what my curiosity is it seems like you're kind of in a tough spot where you've got an easement that goes through there that you have to maintain legally. You've got some parking that probably needs to go on there to maintain the parking for the rest of it. I guess I'm curious as to what the conversation was at planning and zoning as far as that roadway goes and the safety concerns and what you're wanting to do to address those safety concerns. I think you've talked about them a little bit, and I know that it's probably listed in the minutes. There's like 272 pages, but I'm curious as to what that conversation was and what types of plans there are to mitigate the safety concerns of running a roadway through the neighborhood. And then if you could also just touch on, is the realignment and some of those things designed to push people to use a different entryway instead of directing them through the neighborhood.
Madam Mayor, Member Halliburton, during the Planning and Zoning Commission's discussion, they did talk about safety and we did talk about parking and if nose in would be the safest way to address that. And we said that we have an obligation to maintain access through the property on this drive aisle. But at that point in time, how can we best make use of this property? And there are some other considerations on this property that make development restrictive. There are overhead power lines that we have to stay away from. So that dictates where the building placement is. There's also a lot of basalt underneath the roadway now. And so it's going to be very expensive to move it in and of itself. So budgetary constraints, site planning constraints, really reduced the amount of area that we had to move that drive aisle in and keep the buildings on the property. So I think that the discussion points that we've had earlier today, looking at diagonal parking and parallel parking to make safer ingress and egress out of those parking stalls is going to be our biggest bang for the buck. And so I think that our opportunity now is before we submit for design review is finding out of those three scenarios, nose in, diagonal, and parallel, which is the safest configuration that we can still get beneficial use of that drive aisle, still be able to convey vehicles through the property, but in a safe manner for vehicles and most importantly, pedestrians.
Great. And Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. I think one of the other things that Council President Clegg mentioned was just examining the potential expanding width of the pathway with ITD on that stretch as well. And so just to kind of confirm as far as what your view is, you feel like this discussion was had at planning and zoning, these ideas are being explored and you expect to explore those further with design review?
Madam Mayor, Member Halliburton, yes, sir. That it was a discussion. Another discussion that Planning and Zoning Commission had is possibly to pull the application and make it more intensely developed. And so we're really kind of balancing the number of parking spaces that we have, the buildings. Can we fit anything more in there with the overhead power lines? So we've really have a lot to design to this point in time. But before we bring it back before design review, we are looking at what is the safest configuration that we can come with, but still be meeting the parking demand that we think is there. As Ms. Halperman talked about, not only do we have the residents of the apartments to think about, but also visitors. And so there's just, it's a difficult process to go through designing all of the building locations, unit mix, parking, and we're trying to hit it so that it's functional, that we're not over parking, but not yet under parking. We don't want that to become competitive and then they're parking over in the commercial shopping center and preventing their customers from having a nice convenient location to park. So it's a balancing act that is one that we're still ongoing with.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead,
Mayor. Thank you. So first question, at the northwest corner of the property, today there's a actual little parking area that appears to be used by the existing apartments. You're showing actually cutting off access to that. And I wondered what your thought process was behind that instead of letting there be cross access between the two different developments.
Madam Mayor, President Clegg, I believe that was a location for a trash receptacle. And so I think that they had the plan for a trash bin to be collected there, and then the trucks would have access to pick them up. I don't think that we have entertained the motion to have cross access with the Roundhouse Group that owns that property. And if that is something that we would find beneficial for all parties, I think we can reach out to them. I know that they have reached out to us through this entitlement process to see if there's any collaboration that we can do. So that is a discussion that might be warranted and that might help alleviate some concerns here.
Thank you. I think it would potentially provide a different way for people to exit if they chose to, and also provide an easy way for people to visit between the two complexes. Back to the the drive aisle itself, actually the easement into the Columbia Marketplace that you're also designing as a drive aisle. And as you've talked about traffic calming, we've had a couple of comments on that. You are not intending any speed bumps. You're just intending to narrow it in certain places to slow people down, make them aware that there are other people around. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, President Clegg, yes, that is exactly correct. The prescriptive easement for the drive aisle to go through the property requires it to be maintained and accessible at all times, and it precludes us from implementing speed bumps to slow cars down. And it is not our intent to push people through there away from the drive aisle. We want it to function. We want people from Columbia Center to have good access into the shopping center. We want to be a contributing member and not a barrier. And so, but we want to do these improvements in a mindful manner that doesn't, because we're going to have to widen it to 30 feet in width, we don't want it to encourage people to go faster. And so incorporating painted crossings, implementing new materials, bricks, and then the bulb outs, we think that there will be a cumulative effect of slowing people down so it is a safer drive aisle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could follow up. So that 30-foot width that you talk about, because as I was looking at it, I thought it showed 26. Does all of that have to be drive space, or could that accommodate bike lanes?
Madam Mayor, President Clegg, I'm under the impression that that is the requirement for the drive aisle itself and not making provisions for bicycle path. In discussions with the group, we don't know if that is actually ITD property. One of the members that spoke before you earlier today thinks that he pays a CAM charge, common area maintenance agreement, with the owners of the property. So it might be owned by ITD, but maintained by the Simplot organization, or it could be Simplot property. So we're going to investigate that. And I agree with you that if we can get an expanded, wider sidewalk out there that includes a bicycle path, not only will it be more functional, but it'll also be safer.
Thank you. And then if I could ask one question of staff. Cody, just a process question. If we were to deny the appeal and uphold this tonight and add conditions that we're not seeing on the what's before us, would that only go to design review, or does that go through a subdivision plat at some point? Would we see it again, I guess is my question.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, no, you would not see it again. It would be direction given to design review. The only way you might see this again, I suppose, is if they later pursued a condominium plat or something, but I don't understand that to be the case now.
Thank you.
All right, looks like that's it now. You all are up.
Mayor McLean and council members, thank you for entertaining our appeal. It sounds as if we're working toward satisfying the most important things that we objected to in the plan as originally presented and as approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. The traffic considerations obviously were by far the most critical, and I think Brandon has acknowledged them, and I believe everybody here understands them. As long as we maintain unimpeded egress through that easement, the most important questions have been answered. The one bit of data that we didn't have a time to present earlier was there's a McDonald's there, and the drive-through to that McDonald's coming in off Federal through the main entrance to the Columbia Marketplace backs up all the way to the intersection of Gowan Road. Every breakfast, every lunch, and every weekend as people are stocking up to go up to the lake. So that simply reinforces the importance of maintaining that egress through the easement, because trying to have traffic go out there and trucks go out there when it's already totally occluded would be a terrible mess. The only other thing I would ask you to enshrine is that the number of units not be increased above the proposed 270. Brandon just touched on the issue of parking overflowing into the shopping center and also potentially down onto Grand Forest Drive. If the parking in the proposed development is saturated, then people are going to have to park elsewhere, obstruct access to the businesses in the shopping center, and potentially obstruct traffic on Grand Forest. So increasing the residency further, I believe would, and especially reducing the parking further, would make it likelier that the people would be unable to park near their apartments or near the people that were visiting and overflow and obstruct traffic. Other than that, I think there's been a productive discussion, and it sounds as if we're working our way toward a mutually satisfactory solution. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd also like to say thanks for allowing us to hear you hear us today. All right. And if I can, I'd like to answer Councilmember Halliburton's question as well. I think we would not be here today if we would have felt satisfactory resolution at the Planning and Zoning Committee. I think we were heard for 3 minutes, but we were not listened to. And then we were not asked probing questions like the city council did today to help understand why we had the concerns about the traffic on that road. If any of that would have been done, I promise you, I would not be standing here today because it would have opened up a dialogue between the developer and some of the business owners that are there and some of the community. So if there was any lesson learned that come out of this and that can be passed on to the Planning and Zoning Committee, to me, that's something that should be addressed, and so that they not just hear us, that they listen to us. One other thing that I would also recommend is, I did not know this until this meeting, that there was a letter sent out to property owners within 300 feet of the complex. With a complex like this, that's probably not very good idea to do. Anybody within 300 feet of that is like Albertsons, the Simplot Corporation, the liquor store, which is probably owned by the state. I don't know. But anyway, all of those are things that, we did not even know about these until the April 12th meeting. So it makes it very difficult to us to work with the developer earlier in the process. And I actually talked with the members from the Hawkins group here a few minutes ago, and I said, this is something that hopefully is a lesson learned that can help us all in the future, so we don't have to come and waste your time like this. Okay. The other thing is, I feel like a winner. All right. Haven't made your decision yet, but you've asked the same questions that we're asking. And I think there's benefit to that. And I think there's growth in that. And I think that we can work together with the organization, with the developers, so that we can come with a proper solution and it'll be good for everybody involved. Thank you.
We're going to keep you paused for a second because the council president has something to say.
Question for staff, kind of addressing your concerns. Cody, first of all, this is a PUD on more than 5 acres, so I assume it was noticed for 500 feet or 750, I can't remember which, on this size. And then the second, just confirm this, and that it would have also gone to the neighborhood association. Would it have gone to the HOA or the merchant association?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yes, the radius, we actually changed the code recently from 300 to, or fairly recently, from 300 to 500 feet for a project like this. It's owners and occupants. So if there are common lot associations, business associations that own property in there, they would have been noticed as well.
Okay, so we are aware of that and we've been trying to fix it. I think we're closer than we used to be.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Go ahead,
I
Anthony.
agree with David. Everything he said was what I wanted to say. We wouldn't have been here if we felt like we were heard in the first meeting. Nobody asked us any follow-up questions. They let us speak. We sat down and they said what they wanted to say. They said they wanted less parking and more units. And we just kind of sat back and we were wondering why. There was a lot more clarity today, I think. We all spoke, and I think we're getting on the same page. And I think, I think it's going to come out pretty well.
Great.
That's all I got.
That might be the most unique rebuttal we've had in an appeal ever. The bar has now been set very high. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. I would, and thank you. That was a unique rebuttal. Thank you for being thoughtful and bringing your issues forward today. I would move that we deny the appeal of PUD 21-6 at 2454 East Gowan Road and uphold the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission with the finding that additional evidence shows a need for additional conditions on the drive aisle. And that those conditions be that the access road remain open for the full duration of the construction, that any traffic calming not include speed bumps, that the parking not be allowed to be nose in, but be either diagonal or parallel as shown by evidence to be safe at the design review committee, and that the applicant explore adding bike facilities either on the drive aisle or as part of a multi-use path along the sidewalk.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion?
Madam Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
Most of you know that we have a housing shortage in Boise, and this kind of housing is much needed. As the applicant stated, this is a location that hasn't been developed as commercial for many years because commercial just isn't going to be viable. And in fact, these residents may make the commercial that's already there more viable. It's in keeping with our comprehensive plan. It's at a regional center, activity center, which means more housing immediately around that regional activity center is a good thing, makes that activity center more vibrant. And I think the applicant has tried hard to bring forward an application that met the conditions of the site without exceeding it. And so for those reasons, I am in favor of it. And Madam Mayor, if the seconder will allow me, I forgot one of the conditions, which is that the applicant explore a cross-access agreement with the apartment complex to the north at the northwest corner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. First, I guess I'd just like to thank the appellants for being good to work with, for bringing solutions to the table. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times people either they want something to not happen, but they aren't willing to explore any sort of gray areas. And so again, I appreciate you bringing recommendations and solutions to the table that can help us make a better decision for you and for the developer. And the work that went into, doing counts and the care that you put into it. And I appreciate the developer as well being open to receiving those comments. I think that it still is funky to me, this kind of road that goes through there. But, if this was a commercial complex, you'd still have the same problem. No matter what gets put here, there's an easement on that road, a legal easement, and it's always going to be a little bit tricky unless it's absolutely nothing. And like Council President Clegg said, nothing isn't solving affordable housing. It's not driving economic impact into the businesses that are there. That's not a solution as well. So I do think that we got to get that right. And so I'm confident that through design review and through working together and through some of the advice that we got from the neighbors in the area, that we can figure out the best solution for that traffic that's going to be going through there. I know that it was brought up during the planning and zoning, but it sounds like there was some discussion about bike parking as well. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that, especially if we're building out some of those other bike facilities in that area. But I appreciate everybody tonight and your willingness to listen, to talk, and to bring ideas to the table. I'll definitely be supporting the motion.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight, even though you weren't here speaking. It's great to see so many people engaged and willing to leave their homes to spend some time with us on a Tuesday night. Honestly, when I was going through this application earlier, I was very confused. It's like I didn't understand exactly what the issues were. I was reading the record and still not really understanding it. And so it was actually very helpful to dive into it a little bit more and understand the issues with that easement or with the access road, the easement that surrounds the access road, and how that all fit together. So I'm glad that we were able to explore that together and come up with a solution that I think is going to work well. And really, you know, it might seem funky when you're looking at it on paper, but there are lots of high density housing complexes that are on collector roads. And that's essentially what this is going to be. It's going to be on both sides of a collector and that exists all over the city. So I'm glad that this worked out. I hope that the surrounding businesses see the benefit of having some walkable neighbors into your cafes and your stores. And I think that this is just hugely needed housing that's close to one of our largest employers, close to retail opportunities. And I think will end up being a net positive for the neighborhood. So thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
I generally agree with everything that's been said. I think first on the merits of the appeal under our standard of review, it doesn't meet the legal criteria for reversal, in my opinion. But then on the more meaty stuff that we've talked about, it's very clear that if that access road went away, the entire commercial area would be much worse. It'd be almost impossible to get in and out. So like that doesn't work. That also legally doesn't work because, of course, the property owner has this easement that I guess it's a corporate entity, must maintain. And so it has to be there somewhere. There's really nowhere else to put it. There was some discussion from some of the testimony tonight that having those vehicles rolling back and forth through that neighborhood will be burdensome and difficult for the people who eventually live there. And that may be true, but the road has to be there. It has to be 30 feet wide, and the entire commercial district will be worse without it. So it's kind of, we're stuck with what we've got. I did look at the property on Google Maps and I saw the power lines. It's not easy to get what you got in there. So I feel like you did a good job. My final comment, apart from agreeing with everything my colleagues have said, is that, you know, yes, it's true that there are costs associated with high density housing. There are costs associated with lack of housing. And there are costs associated with homelessness. Right now, the median income in Ada County can support the purchase of a house that costs about $280,000. The median home price is over $400,000. And so this is a cost in both ways type situation. I don't think we can build our way out of our housing crisis, but this is exactly the type of development we need in the type of place that we need to be having it. So although that doesn't go to the merits of the appeal, I hope that gives you some sense philosophically of where we're coming from here.
Madam Mayor. Well, I think this is a really good project, and I think it was made even better tonight with suggestions that were made and the additions that were made. And I want to thank the appellant for your thoughtfulness in this process. Three of you specifically in bringing your ideas. They were very well thought out and well taken. So I think it made a big difference in your approach. We don't always see that type of approach on an appeal, and it was outstanding. And I really like the addition of the dog park. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the appellant and the applicant. This is, I think, what we would like to see at all our council meetings is people treating each other with a sense of dignity and grace and being willing to come together to reach a solution. I myself am a renter, and so I have to admit, I wince a little bit when I hear somebody portray renters as being less than contributory to a community. The reality is I wish I could own a home again. But the last recession was challenging. And unfortunately, I joined the ranks of people who lost their homes to foreclosure. But I am a woman of faith. And I believe that the reason we go through those experiences is so that we can have empathy and compassion for others when they go through those similar situations. So I think there are a lot of people in Boise who would love to be homeowners, but it's just going to be so much harder for folks to get into a house of their own. I looked at my little tall skinny house that I built in 2002 near Boise State. I think the assessor has it at 350,000. I built it for 97,000. And I would love to be in my little tall skinny house again. So I have no doubt that the folks who end up living in these beautiful apartments are going to be grateful to still be able to live in Boise. And you never know, in the next 5 to 10 years, you may have more renters up on this dais. So I just want to thank you for being open and solution driven tonight.
Well, I won't be voting, but it's funny, after so many years on council, I was glad to see that the council president's motion listed everything I'd written down that needed to be part of the motion. And we both have math on our pages too. I want to thank you all for coming. And the students that are here tonight, welcome. I hope to see you again. It's probably just for credit for class. We probably won't, but it'd be really fun to see you again. It's awesome to see faces in these chambers. Sir, when my kids played soccer, your coffee shop saved me. I would drop them off for spring soccer and say I had to go get coffee and then hide from the cold weather as long as I could possibly stay in your shop. And UPS store as well. It was a great place to run errands. I really see this as a great solution. Our community needs housing. And we saw tonight 9 new homes that folks making at the area median income will qualify to buy. And now we're seeing this proposal for multifamily apartments that make homes accessible to Boiseans as well, connected directly to the highway, so quicker access to jobs, to stores to support. And I expect over time that strip mall there will continue to have more interesting things, and businesses will stabilize and then pull in more. And then, of course, ready access to what is now the Boise City fields down at Simplot, I call it Park Fields, but the park complex there as well. So I really appreciate the way this was worked through and seeing everybody tonight, and look forward to seeing more folks frequenting the businesses that I often did when we headed over for soccer.
Madam Mayor, I forgot to ask staff to return findings to us.
Great.
Thank you.
And with that, clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.